I'm just going to take 2 seconds to set up the stream, and we will be going live in just a minute. You have all sent some really fantastic topics that I cannot wait to dive into. This session is going to be very interactive with a lot of live demonstrations. So give me 1 minute. I'm just going to check the stream, and then we will get going. This session is going to be very interactive with a lot of live. Fantastic. Okay, and we have several of us joining in the studio here. Martin's welcome. Mavis, I see several of you joining on Facebook Live. That is fantastic. And I will, sometimes there's a slight lag, but don't worry, I will be sure to take all of your questions. Those of you who have sent questions in advance obviously are going to get a little bit of priority, and that's what I'm going to focus on here. If you want me to be able to share some of your comments, Lireza, great to have you join us. If you want to be able to share comments, you have to give Facebook approval, and there's a link for doing that. Otherwise, it will come through anonymously, but I will read it out to you. So we have a range of good topics that we're going to get into today that have been sent from you. One, we are going to cover how to find and identify and hone in on a high-value debate in your field. This is a really great topic. A lot of you have mentioned that you've struggled to go and streamline your interest from your research areas and themes of interest into a winning topic. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that area and how you can troubleshoot that and get it to work for yourself. The other thing that we are going to go through that is going to be really fantastic for you is something that many of you have encountered, and thanks to Brian for sharing this with us. It is how to fill pages. Sometimes you run into, many of you are worried about having too much word count to fill, and others of you end up having trouble cutting down, having too many words, and that can be a real challenge to reduce that. So we're actually going to cover both of those, but I'm really going to emphasize what Brian is facing, where he's saying, how do I fill pages? What can I do to fill pages without just putting in a whole bunch of useless fluff? And Brian, I know you've been feeling stuck, so I'm really looking forward to helping you with that. Finally, we're going to cover, and again, today's great, and I love these Grad Clinic sessions because these are real examples, real students, things you have sent to me, and many of you deal with similar challenges, similar struggles. And, I just want to step back for those of you who don't know me. I'm Professor David Stuckler, and I came from a small town in Texas. I went to a small school, and I was a first-generation grad student. And I had a lot of bumps along the road, along the way. I dropped out of high school. My first term of college, I dropped out. And it was only when I started to get some real support and real quality mentorship that I was able to break through my own personal barriers, some imposter syndrome and some self-limitations that I had, and really thrive. Flash forward, I was able to publish as an undergrad. That helped me to get into Yale University, go on, do my PhD in Cambridge, ultimately get on the tenure track at Harvard University and become a full professor at Oxford by the time I was 30. And one of the reasons I created Fast Track Grad was to create this powerful sense of community where I could give you guys access to those secret strategies that we would teach our best students at Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge. I want to make these completely available to you here. Tina asks about my work now. I'm very committed to Fast Track Grad and creating this access for you. I'm passionate about helping you avoid some of the most common pitfalls that you face as grads. A lot of my research is right at the intersection of social science and medicine and population health. Dealing with social dimensions recently of the COVID pandemic. And if you're interested in that, click on my Google Scholar profile and you'll see some of the over 400 articles we've published on this topic and how I'm consistently among the top 1% of cited researchers in the world, objectively by Web of Science. And again, I want to share with you guys these secrets that can help you guys overcome challenges and really unleash tremendous productivity to doing the things that you need to do to succeed as a grad. So with that, I want to go straight into this topic of finding the debate. And this is really, really not that easy. I see a lot of people when they go in and they think about studies, they often start from a point of saying, well, I have this really neat method. I have these tools. And so I just want to apply these tools to things. I don't know what I can apply. I'm going to find I have these methods. I want to apply it to things. Again, I don't want to completely knock this approach. It's not bad. It can have some value in certain circumstances and scenarios. But it also can greatly limit you in the sense it can get you off a top. It can get you into a topic that's low value. It can be derivative. It might not be what you're really passionate about. And so I take the other way around. When searching for a topic, I use what I call what we use with our students is a straight line method. And we first take a step back and we first look at, okay, where do you want to go career wise? What skills do you need? What connections do you need to open those career path doors for you? And we want to make sure that your topic is at the very least in line with that. Then, when we're looking for a topic, and this is before we even look for the debate, by the way, I want to make sure that you're passionate. And this might seem obvious, but oftentimes a lot of students, when they're starting with a method, might not really be. I mean, I never got into grad school because I thought, oh, I'm really passionate about using mass spec back when I was working in the lab, or doing Western blots when I was in the lab. Or now I'm really passionate about fiddling around with Stata or R. Or nobody really says that. You're passionate about something. I was passionate about helping others and trying to make a difference in the world, and that's ultimately what got me to try to use my data skills to apply to helping others and trying to solve some of the world's most challenging health problems, because I felt I could really make a difference. And so I really want you guys to really think hard before you go out and hunt the debate using the tools to marry up your passions and where you're trying to go career-wise. Then the second thing you really need to do in a space is make sure that it's feasible for you, that you already have the skills to take it on. Not all of you will necessarily have certain skills, and it might take you a long time to acquire. And one of the economists I like, John Maynard Keynes, has said, when asked, why do you always focus on the short run? And it's because he said, well, in the long run, we're all dead. And, as a grad student, you have so many competing demands for your time. You need to make sure you're also entering into a space that's feasible with skills you have or you can readily and feel confident about acquiring in the near future. So a lot of my students who are getting into research for the first time, we do a lot of work on systematic reviews, and you'll find a fantastic, really valuable training course on how to do systematic reviews in the Facebook group. By the way, just a reminder to several of you, do join our Facebook group if you haven't already. We've got over 30 hours of free master classes on lots of different topics that are going to help you. So you really want to make sure that your topic is feasible. Systematic reviews are a start. If you have some quantitative skills, that can be nice. Some are doing qualitative work, so that's good. But start at a point that you already know. So once you've got, you know where you're going career-wise, you know where your passion is, you know what's feasible. Now, only when you've got those good elements in place, can we start within them, try to optimize the debate. And optimizing the debate is tricky. So a lot of students will really rely on their mentors and supervisors to do this. And it's one of the reasons we did a session on the Matthew effect, why people in top programs sometimes have a huge advantage, kind of the equivalent of the rich get richer in grad school and have more success. And part of it is, if you have access to mentors and supervisors who are right at the center of your debates in the field, they're going to help you automatically come up with topics that are winning debates, and for you, right at the center of the field. Not all of you are blessed with that kind of access, but there is a way you can short circuit it. So let me take a concrete example that comes from Stephanie, and I'm going to share my screen and just share with you a little bit about how you can begin to map this out for yourself. So I'm using Stephanie's example here. What I'm going to do is create a whiteboard. Now, unfortunately, Stephanie was not able to join us on the call, so I'm just going to take some liberties and imagine a few things here about Stephanie. And let's see the screen. And oh, great, we've got a nice advert for the No Time to Die film. Go check that out. I'm planning to go see it here. And so I like to use Miro to map things out. And you really want to take some time to make a mental map of the research areas. My computer does lag on streaming, so bear with me as this loads up. But there's a very common structure you need to have in your research questions to hone in on the debate. And so you want to make place, again, before you start search bar. So we're using an imaginary whiteboard for Stephanie, who related to me. She's very much interested in, okay, this is going to be a little bit slow, but there. So, okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and get some of the areas that on the board for us. So we have health system and another top. So we need to really, and many of you will start just like Stephanie here and say, I'm interested in health system strengthening. Now what? Well, usually in and of itself, that's not going to be enough. I want you to push harder about your areas and get a few more things on the board. So I know that, for example, Stephanie is currently in South Korea. I know that usually you tell me your areas. She's interested in tuberculosis. Does a lot of global health work in that space. She's really interested in work around vulnerable groups and especially minority populations. It's great. So you want to get this on the board because these are kind of areas that we want to have in the mix as we're brainstorming a potential topic. And again, I say this in finding the debate because so much of the impact of your work and the success you're going to have will trace back to these initial decisions about what topic to take on. One of the great, tremendous freedoms we enjoy as researchers and academics is that we can shape the agenda. We have the freedom to choose what we believe is important and apply our talents to making a difference. That's really a gift. And with that gift comes responsibility, and don't squander that. So often in a rush, students just jump into the first thing that comes their way. Really, you're going to spend so much time on this research topic. Take the time, investment, and energy to optimize it for yourself. And if you don't get that right, many problems I see students have come from really ill-defined topic, weak debate, things they're not passionate about, fundamental original sins that come back to haunt them later. Now, the other thing in a clear and well-defined topic that you're going to have before we haven't gotten to the debate yet, is that most of your topic will have a very simplified and some level structure. We're going to come to this when we look at Mavis's proposal later in the session, but you're going to have some variable is related to another, an independent a variable and an outcome variable, a cause and an effect. And this is not always going to be the case, but I would venture to say, apart from those of you doing very, very basic science, just trying to say, I want to understand how this works, the vast majority of your studies are going to want to understand, are going to be a shade more applied and want to look at the relationship between something and something else. All right, and it could be the relationship between I don't know, mating patterns and the reproduction of inequality in society. Could be the relationship, like Mavis is going to look at divorce and the well-being of children. But most of what you're going to do is going to take this on. So here we need to start thinking about, in this space of health system strengthening, South Korea, tuberculosis, vulnerable groups, minority, we don't really have anything here. Maybe tuberculosis could be an outcome. Tuberculosis in a population like vulnerable groups and minorities. We could think of, okay, well, does health system strengthening help reduce tuberculosis in vulnerable groups and minorities? So you can start to get some ideas. But now that you've started to map out a few of your passions, now we can take the step and start hunting the literature to see where is the conversation space. Now, sometimes these conversations you can find through newspapers, op-eds. This can be a great place to find a debate because if they're in the op-ed pages, if somebody's writing an op-ed to the New York Times about tuberculosis, guaranteed that is a live discussion because that's something that they wouldn't be printed in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or BBC or wherever it is if it wasn't of interest to millions of people. So that's That's one default way you've got a high value area. But the other way is to look at where there is some academic conversation going on. So if we just put health systems strengthening, right, this is already going to tell us, right, Google is going to tell us what people are searching for and where conversation is. And, a lot of these here are very kind of conceptual pieces, converging towards concepts, think pieces. They're not really research pieces. And that's the first thing that kind of pops out to me here. So I want to get to research pieces, but let's just have a look at where this is on tuberculosis. And I hope you can start to imagine for yourselves how you could say, okay, these are the areas I'm passionate about. Let me think about how I could line them up into one relates to another. Let me find where the connection is and progress in this way. So here we go. Now we're starting to see things that are a little bit better. And you see often here, this study gives us a very nice clue that implications for health system straightening, pre-treatment loss to follow-up of patients. So it's not about health systems per se, but it has implications for what was clearly a big agenda. So I'm not seeing a lot necessarily here studies on health system strengthening, which tells me that health system strengthening might be a broad umbrella area, but it's too broad and you need to get narrower into it. And you can already see from some of these papers, I have some background in this area, so no, but here, health insurance is supposed to be able to strengthen health systems. So what does this tell us? We need to go back to our map and say, okay, we need to take some pieces of health systems and figure out what is being debated here. And here you've got different things. There are alternative insurance systems. We already just saw one talking about this. Insurance systems. And now you want to go on health system strengthening and see where the conversation. Here's one that's an analysis of grants to figure out what are the different health system priorities, what's going on to contribute to health system strengthening, different building blocks of health systems. So some of these areas here that are looking potentially interesting. You have insurance systems, and with that, you're going to have things around finance models, different financing, and I think one of the areas I think of is with this too. These are trying to make sure people are covered, that their care is paid for, and that they're not paying for it themselves. So you can come back and kind of expand your map and say, okay, well, there's definitely a concern. One of the reasons we want to expand health systems and get the financing right and strengthen it, one is to provide access to care for people with tuberculosis. So one is care, but one is to prevent people from paying for it themselves, to make sure that people aren't becoming poor because they have tuberculosis. So that already starts to give you another clue of where you can potentially find debate. You also see prisons. This is another population that's clearly quite important and happens to be in your vulnerable groups. We can already start refining this. And we can see that incarcerated populations, there's clearly a dedicated discussion here. So let's refine our map. And you could already start now. You're starting to see a range of different ideas, hypotheses, and possibilities spring forth. But already one that immediately jumps to me is a bidirectional relationship, say the impact of tuberculosis on poverty, or vice versa, the impact of poverty on tuberculosis. Classically, people are sick because they're poor, and they're poor because they're sick. Many of the phenomena you look at might have this kind of bidirectional relationship. And I suspect, if a little bit, and say poverty and tuberculosis, we're seeing articles that have a research question, have a policy agenda, and ecological analysis. I'm seeing some real research studies and rural poverty delayed presentation. And these are research studies, and they're getting very highly cited. And they're very recent. So I like this conversation about poverty and tuberculosis a lot. And I think you could look in here and define a really nice agenda around this. We're seeing areas that clearly link to tuberculosis. The other thing that you can try to do in debate is also to start looking at recent events or other things, other high-value debates that are going on. Things like climate change is a big debate going on right now, is COVID-19. That immediately comes to mind in this area. And there's probably very clearly a link between COVID-19 and tuberculosis. And so you see, just looking at areas starts to give you an idea. Look at COVID and tuberculosis. And as we scan through here, we can already start to see there's some initial studies getting huge amounts of citations: tuberculosis, COVID-19, and migrants. Tuberculosis and HIV, tuberculosis, COVID-19 co-infection. So you can kind of also begin to see that this is an area that to deal with these two probably is going to be a health systems challenge, and probably something going on in the conversation of health system strengthening. I don't see a whole lot here, so I think I would go back. This would probably be a hot area, but I would focus on poverty and TB. And I think what I would look at then to really define this as a nice topic of, okay, so poverty seems to be linked to tuberculosis. And I would really focus in this research then to say, okay, what is the role, if you want to hook this, and this arrow is not working the way I want, what is the role of, and look at this, poverty and tuberculosis through a lens of health system strengthening. So understand what things, if poverty is causing tuberculosis, in what ways can the health system be strengthened in order to prevent that from happening? I live in a world, personally, equity. For me, equity means that we should try to stop people from getting sick because they're poor. We should try to stop this ill health before it starts. I live in a world where I really believe in prevention. So this already begins to make a concrete agenda that's much clearer than, say, where we started, just on health system strengthening, and starts to look at alternative ways that this link between poverty and tuberculosis can maybe be broken down. And the other thing I would just consider and include in here, there are things that help protect people that are not just health strengthening, but you might want alternatives to health system strengthening, like social protection, social safety nets, because we can see, right, incarcerated groups, other vulnerable groups, homeless people are at risk in this space. So you might be able to come up with a system like a broad topic for an area of inquiry on alternative social and health protection for combating tuberculosis. And there you go. That can be a broad area of which you could see. One could be a study looking at poverty and TB. Another could be looking at how different components of health system strengthening, different financing, or others case studies have helped break this link or not. And others that might look at non-conventional mechanisms like social protection could help break this link. We could also extend this and look at, instead of poverty, you could look at how maybe incarceration has been other social risks in groups, maybe mass imprisonment. You could see this playing a role in Russia, in the US, many countries, plays a role in TB. I don't want to go too far, but working with Stephanie, we started from a point. She came to me saying, I'm interested in health system strengthening. How do I find a research area? And this is the kind of mapping and process that you want to take for yourselves to try to detect a winning topic, and to know that when you look it up, as that you know that there is going to be a debate. Just like here, we can see that there is very clearly a live, recent, and an ongoing discussion about tuberculosis and poverty. That I'm very confident that this will be a winning topic. Here's a really nice systematic review as well, focusing on sub-Saharan Africa. Here's one: resurgence of tuberculosis in New York City. Great topics applying to both rich and resource deprived. So guys, pop through any questions. Those of you searching for topics, let me know how you do. Comment below if you're searching for topics, and if you are able to make these maps yourself, and through your searches in Google Scholar, go from your passion, areas of interest, to a winning high-impact debate. Again, trying to use this simple framework of getting some factor related to another outcome that you're interested in. Okay, with that, I want to move on to Brian's topic, which is filling pages. And I say this smiling, and it's not because I'm laughing at all in any way. This is very serious, because I've had some students I've worked with where, right, take, for example, if we're doing a systematic review, to publish that in a journal, you only need 3,500 words. There's a real emphasis on brevity and conciseness when you publish in a journal. But for a master's thesis, they want 10,000 words. And this leaves you in a situation of, what do I do to fill all this space? And this can be a real challenge. It can cause some frustration and anxiety for people. And I'm just looking to see if Brian is on the call with us. Unfortunately, Brian is not on. He may be on Facebook Live, but Brian, I know you're also at work, so may not be able to join directly, and that's okay. So for Brian, there are at least three main strategies to quote unquote fill pages. And let me outline this for you. So what I like to do with the students I work with is focus on doing what you need to do to produce a high quality publishable paper. And now, if you do that properly, you're only going to need about that 4,000 words. But maybe for your thesis, that chapter needs to be 10,000. So what do? There are some textbook ways to begin to fill pages in a simple way that you can then, when you need to, just cut all that stuff out so you can submit your paper to a journal. So one of those, and this is often something that looks very, when I see it, looks very grad school, in the sense that these are things that would be in a grad school thesis, but would never be in the research paper. And one of that is to have a textbook discussion about the methods. You can go through the pros, the cons, the strengths and weaknesses of a particular method you've chosen. Often for the paper itself, you just say, following the best practices in the field, or following so-and-so who you cite, we use this method. But for example, if you're doing a systematic review, you're not going to need to say this at all, saying we're following Prisma guidelines doing a systematic review. But instead you might say, well, we did a systematic review for the following reasons. Systematic review has the advantage of, it's not cherry picking, it's not selectively looking at literature. It helps fight publication bias, all these things. And so you would never put that in your publication because the field knows about that. And you don't need to justify choosing it. But for grad school, it's a nice way to show people that you have mastery of the subject, that you know the things that you need to know as a grad, and fill lots of pages in a way that's easy to cut out later. So that's one. Another fill paging strategy is on theory and background. So, for example, with one of my students, Cornelia, we were reviewing literature on gender biases in bribes for government services. And, we specifically reviewed the literature that was about gender, what we knew about gender biases and why that was important. But we could have easily filled pages and expand and say, well, let's look at all the cultural and economic factors we know that go into people paying bribes. And could very easily have inflated that 5-10 pages with meaningful information in a subsection that we could then just chuck out later because we wouldn't need it. So your theory, background, and literature review is often something that you can greatly expand, going to different topics or sub-themes in your area. The last area that I think is a classic fill page strategy that's very easy to do and is a good thing to do anyway is to really start detailing the limitations of the work that you did. And there are going to be many. And this is also a nice opportunity to armor up yourself because you're going to, when you come to your defense, get critique and people are going to ask you questions. It's a way for you to say, yeah, actually, I thought about that. I anticipated that. And here's how I addressed it. And, here are ways other people addressed it. And for the future, I think this is how it should be addressed. So, any study I do, I put in study limitations. Maybe I put 3 or 4. If you need to fill pages, maybe instead of 3 or 4, you can have a really long section on your limitations. Maybe you have 10 limitations, and maybe you have many more implications and suggestions for your future research. I hope that helps and begins to make some sense. So Brian, do come through in the chat with any questions or comments that you've got on that. But I hope that's clear. And now here, Mavis, I want to come to you. And Brian, do come back with any questions, and let us know if you're able to fill pages using one of those 3 strategies. The other thing I think when students sometimes are filling pages, sometimes just last thing I want to bookend that with is sometimes they just don't have a structure in place and know what they need to write or what they need to say. So that can be one of the issues for sure. So make sure always that you have a really good structure in place. Okay, Mavis, I want to pull up yours here because Mavis is in a situation where she's got to write a proposal for her department, and Mavis has had several people in this group. At times, a challenging relationship with her supervisor. I hope that's okay to say, Mavis. And in fact, because that, so many of you have mentioned you've had challenging relationships with your supervisor. Next week, we're going to do a dedicated session on troubleshooting your rocky relationship with your supervisor, understanding why grad students have challenging relationships with their supervisor, and we're bringing in Gabriel from South Africa, who had a very difficult supervisor relationship, had to take some radical steps to reset that relationship and ultimately change supervisor, and has been amazingly successful. So you're not going to want to miss Gabriel's story. Excited to bring that to you next week and to cover some of the many common problems people have with their supervisors and the best approach you can take to deal with those different kinds of challenges. But that's not what I want to talk about here with you, Mavis. I want to go back and share my screen and we'll look at your proposal. And specifically the feedback Mavis got on her proposal was that it wasn't enough. And often what this means, if I can just interpret what the professors are saying, is that this is really not on topic for us, and they're off in a wrong direction. So let's take a look. I'm going to share my screen here and take a look at what Mavis shared. Now, they specifically said they want it to be more sociological, and so I'm looking at this for the first time here, as there's several of you. I'm going to try to zoom this in so you can see a little bit better for the dissertation research proposal. And if it needs to be sociological, I can instantly see that this is all looking very individual level psychological. So instantly, right, you can convert this to sociological. But a bigger issue and a deeper issue is, when a professor is responding in this way, he's often saying, this doesn't really fit with my interest. That's kind of behind the scenes. This isn't, there's a deeper problem here. In that area, if this isn't in their wheelhouse or something that they're interested in, is a very big red flag that you need to respond to. Because for you to get time and investment from a supervisor to help you succeed and have a smooth, easy ride, right? You want them to take an active interest in you and your project. If you're coming to them on something they don't care about and they feel is just a chore, you're just not going to get the same kind of support and investment from faculty that top students get. And unfortunately, when you need that support and investment, because the grad school is very much still an apprentice system. There are very few academics who just figure it out on their own and fly. They almost always have some very successful or effective person in the field take them under their wing and bring them in. So the deeper issue is, sure, we could take this and convert this from psychological to sociological and create a new framework. But I'm very concerned that it's not connecting to your supervisor's interests. So one first thing I would do is I would step back, look at your supervisor's papers, and at least see if there's some hook. If you need to work with this person closely, is there some hook to their core interests? And if you can't connect to their interests, you're just going to get connect theirs and yours. If you can find some sweet spot that connects those, you're going to get a lot more time and attention. Now, I will say about the topic, what you had before, just before changing, the psychological effects of divorce and separation on children. I don't think you need to have a semicolon here. You could just have on children's mental well-being. This fits the structure, right, of X and Y, so that's nice. But what I can immediately see here is a proposal that's a little bit undercooked, and a proposal that in need of a conceptual framework. And I think this is the lack of I'm just scrolling through it now. Yeah, and I can already see just at a glance that these research questions are are okay, but it needs a conceptual framework. So there are a few things that a research proposal needs to be able to argue effectively. Right? It needs to define the boundaries here. I'm just going to do this. What is known on the topic? What is not known on the topic? Right? And this you need to lead to a gap in the literature. This is really critical. What is not known? What is weak about existing studies? Right. You need to take a big topic where there's clearly a debate and conversation, using kind of what we talked about at the beginning of this session, and really hone in on what is known and not known. So for poverty, tuberculosis, it might be, well, we don't know how, say, homeless prevention systems can play a role in preventing tuberculosis, or something else. So you need to figure out what's not known on your topic, what's weak about existing studies, and you need to articulate that gap. And once you have that gap, it's kind of like rolling out the red carpet for the study you want to do. And now there you've got the gap, like enter your proposal here, that's going to plug that gap. That's really critical, and that's really key. And, just scanning through this very quickly, right, I'm seeing a lot of things here about studies affecting things that are, this is kind of zigzagging, and there's not a clear structure here, and there's a research problem, but I don't see anything at all about what the gap is in what we know. So this is hugely missing. And maybe your gap could be, well, look, all the literature has been conducted in this space is at very much individual level and psychological, but it's missed some of the meso level or sociological phenomena, like the powerful forces that are actually leading parents to split and to household dissolution. Those are also forces that maybe are acting on children's mental well-being as well. And the psychological studies have zoomed so far in, they actually haven't seen some of these bigger issues that are changing the pictures. There's a kind of an environmental fallacy in that we often try to look, and when we think about causation in our own life, we often tend to think about individual factors, but we tend to overlook the powerful role of the social circumstances around us, and how those things that may be harder to see and affect many people can also cause some very individual harms. Don't want to go too much into a discussion about sociology, but you need to define that gap. And ideally, as you derive this and build this up, it will link, your ideal world is this will link to your supervisor, and if not your supervisor, at least somebody in your department. And that's just really important for you to have a smooth, easy ride. Now, conceptual framework, I hope all of you guys know what I mean by this. But if we were going to do a conceptual framework, we need kind of a logic or flow diagram that can really make it simple and clear for the people working with you. You want to make it easy for your supervisors to work with you. You don't want to be the student that in their mind is the too difficult student that is going to cause them problems. So you want to make it really easy and clear what you're trying to do. And here I recommend another tool. That's kind of like Miro, but I'm just pulling up a whiteboard. So let's take Mavis, your topic here. You've got divorce and separation, and you've got children's well-being. Okay. Oops, and I can't spell. Now, often this space, divorce, children's well-being, this is at the individual level. What I was mentioning before is we can think of the causes, the link here, things that cause divorce. Well, what about an economic recession, right? That definitely is one of those kinds of more economic or sociological factors that can play a role here, right, leading to divorce. And when we think about divorce to children's well-being, there are other things that are going on, right? So there are some things that make it easier to get a divorce, some things that make it harder to get a divorce. Like there's laws, for example, that some countries make it very, very hard to get divorces. And it's costly, and some people just choose to. It does tip people to change together. There have definitely been some nice studies finding that when laws change to make it easier to divorce, and lo and behold, more divorces happen. So there's a divorce, but there's also, what's going on behind the scenes in a divorce is things like a troubled relationship. And troubled relationships have have things that are also, that it's not the divorce per se, and this is something you're going to have to deal with, but a troubled family relationship can harm children's well-being in a number of ways to think about, right? So what's important for children's well-being more than anything in studies that have been found is parental time investment. This is a pretty powerful phenomenon, right? Now, I'm definitely not an expert in this literature, but this is something that's going on. And so if the parents are too busy fighting with each other or having other problems in their social lives, they're probably, divorce is going on, they're distracted, probably kids are not getting the time they need, and their well-being is going to suffer. So one of the reasons you want to go, as you're looking through the literature, look for what these different causal pathways are, the different things that you need to take stock of in the literature and get those down on the page. And so what you'll see is what you have here, as you summarize the stuff, your literature review, there isn't a structure to this literature review. You need to have a clear structure of how you're going to do this. You're talking about some long-term effects, on long-term effects on children, divorcing parents. Here you've got co-parenting practice, communication theory. The proposal really lacks some structure. So I recommend trying first, before you start writing, get clarity in your own mind of this system. And then you might need to read some literature in your own mind to create a conceptual framework and get clarity on the system and use that. You're right, there's children's well-being. In here you said, I can see you going through children's well-being in the longer term. Long-term children's well-being, relevant as well. You have some discussion there. You have parental time investment. I think the actual term they talked about was co-parenting, maybe both parents working together. So that's an issue. This is a channel. And I think what you would want to do is summarize your literature review and break it into subheadings. Say, okay, so your literature review, you have the impact on well-being. So you might have a summary on the impact on children's well-being in the short term. Or you might have an impact on well-being on their mental health or educational outcomes or something like that. You need some kind of structure or mechanisms linking divorce to children's suffering or ill health or whatever it is. Or maybe you want to talk about the role of co-parenting and move all the literature to these certain areas. And they really need to come to the gap, right? What we don't know. Well, maybe you look back at your model and you find, well, nobody's really looked at some of the sociological factors that are behind the scenes here. Maybe no one's really looked at certain key mechanisms that are part of the story. Maybe there's some factors that could help break down these linkages that need to be real studied. Maybe divorce doesn't have to pose such a risk to children's well-being if we can do divorces in a way that but parents still are able to maintain the time investments with their children. I don't know. These figures can give rise to creativity once you found your topic, which I think your topic on divorce and children's well-being is good, but you've just got to flesh this out a little more. And I think if you can get these things right, connect with your supervisor, create a structure, and before you do anything more in the writing, first get clarity with the conceptual framework. Mavis, you're going to give yourself a much easier ride. Mavis, let me know any questions, comments about that. I've got you here. I'm actually going to turn your mic on. Mavis, are you with us? Yeah, there's your mic, Mavis. I can see you there. Any suggestions, comments, Mavis, on that? Do you think you can take that forward and begin to operationalize it? Okay, I can see you here in the studio. I can see you commenting yes. Okay, don't be shy. You're welcome to speak up online with us, but that's nice, Mavis. I'm glad to see that you're saying yes and that you're able to use this. Again, this is something that a lot of people struggle with, and you guys really can risk going in circles and wasting a lot of times if you start writing without having clarity first in your own mind in some structure to work within. Okay, we're going to come to our last one that Queen sent, which is a CV, and then I'm going to come to some of your questions. I see a question here. Already completed my master's, applied to the PhD. So I'm going to come back, and Mavis says, thank you. Of course, Mavis, it's absolutely my pleasure. I'm glad you could join us today here. So I'm going to take some of these questions here in a second. I haven't forgotten about you. But I want to cover the CV from Queen. So Queen sent me an email in which let me just pull this email out. But effectively, Queen went for a job, didn't get the job, and was feeling blue about it. Says the job I applied for was one advertised as a grad link for somebody just coming out of grad school, and I wonder if my CV presentation might have affected my application for the post. So again, thanks to all of you who are willing to share the things you're struggling with for the benefit of the community. And look, I think one thing that happens, I remember when I was first applying to jobs, I applied to 40 postdocs at the beginning, and I only got one, and I made a whole lot of mistakes along the way. Just things I didn't know then that I do know now. But I got really down, and I started thinking, because oftentimes you send these off and you don't get any feedback. You don't know what you did wrong or why you didn't get it. And the first thing to know is that sometimes a lot of these jobs, there's already an insider connection. There's already somebody on the front line who's set to get this job. And so without any feedback, I know there's a temptation to do something. And sometimes there are two types of sin. There's a sin of omission, of failing to do something you need to do, and a sin of commission, of doing something that you don't need to do. And sometimes, without any feedback or any data, you don't really know what to tweak or what to change. So careful about that without having any feedback. And often you might be tempted to go ask for feedback, but often the feedback you'll get from when you're turned down and you did get an interview would just be very generic. I might say, oh, you're not eligible for this reason, or oh, it didn't fit, or something very generic that the people who have the position are just trying to cover themselves legally, and they don't want to give you anything that you could really challenge them with. So you're not going to get much. So I generally advise against really pushing for that. And it also doesn't really look good for the future if you want to go down that route. That said, I did take a look very briefly. I opened up your CV and some immediate things jumped out to me. So thanks again for sharing your CV. You've worked as a public health nurse with a lot of experience. And you've been a public health student at Limerick, which is great. But one thing that immediately jumps out, again, not knowing the specificities of what job you applied for and what his call was, but this looks very generic, right? You have all these different things, good nurse-patient relationship. This probably is not relevant to the job you're applying for, unless you're applying for a nursing job, but I don't think, based on what you told me, that's what you're applying for. So I would take some of these things out that distracts you. Look, these people are going to glance at this. And if I glance at this, I don't really know who you are at a glance. I mean, just being very quickly, you're looking at this quickly. I get hundreds of applications. I got to look at this quickly. So I want you to get what really stands out about you and hooks to the position right away. Know what boxes that position needs to tick and make sure that is front and center. And I don't know. I mean, if it's quantitative skills, this needs to be front and center. If it is administering medication, which I don't think it is, needs to be front and center. If it's not, get rid of this stuff. What does getting rid of this stuff do? You guys can even see this as your eye is on this page, right? I think this problem solving needs to go. You're going to get more exciting and innovative things that are going to be here. I would cut this down massively. And again, dedicated and passionate, that's fine, but hook to what they want. If you're going to a data analysis position, none of this stuff is going to help. Now, I don't dislike saying this, that drew your heart to healthcare. That's not bad. I like showing that you're passionate about things, but this needs to be factored down considerably. And I think I also, one of the main things that I see here that I'm really missing is your education. So, right, usually up in your CV at the top, you'll have something about your education, which I think it looks like you're doing Masters in Public Health, University of Limerick. This is one of the first things people are going to look for. So I'm going to share with you a template for a CV, but really before you even do this, you really need to take applying for jobs, academic jobs, non-academic jobs, whatever you're applying for, very seriously. Do your research and homework and really get to know in excruciating detail what they're looking for, what their criteria are, and craft your cover letter in your CV to make sure that this is front and center. So Queen, I hope that makes sense. I don't see you right here in the studio with us, but thanks for being willing to share your CV, and wish you luck for the future on it, and let us know how you get on. And I will send you a template that's helped a lot of my students when they apply for jobs in restructuring their CV. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to come back to some of the questions coming to you from the group. So let me come back to one that came through on the chat. So this is a question. I already completed my master's and applied for the PhD. I'm wasting time and I need to do straight PhD. I think it's beneficial to do. I'm not sure what iPhD is. Maybe this is a new thing that I'm not really aware of. iPhD is something new, maybe international PhD, or I mean, there are different routes to the PhD. There can be ones where you do a master's first, and if you do well in the master's, you're automatically into the PhD. But no, sorry about this, Tina. I'm really not, Tina. I'm not understanding your question. Integrated PhD, the MPhil. Oh, right. Okay, so you're saying you want MPhil plus PhD. Yeah. So usually, often, I mean, if you're applying to the UK, the way it will work is you can apply to the master's, and then if you do well in the master's, it's kind of a testing ground for the university. So if you're not doing well, they don't want to work with you, or there's a problem, they can just chuck you out. It's like, well, you got the master's, you didn't do well, we don't want to keep you here. By it's a little bit safer for the program. To go straight for the PhD, this really depends if you're ready in what you need. So in the UK, if you go that route, you go straight into doing research. You need to have a supervisor lined up. You need to have a compelling research topic, and you may need to have some source of funding to power you. In the US, right, you do a PhD, you're going to go through classes. So it's effectively MPhil and PhD. But because you're saying MPhil and PhD, it looks to me that you're thinking about a UK PhD, I think. But Tina, correct me here if I'm wrong. So really that judgment is, if you don't already have a supervisor who you've got a relationship with, who you know you want to work with, for a UK PhD, I would be very, you probably need to go through the MPhil PhD route. Ideally, if you're going to the master's at the same institution, it sounds like you're changing institution. If you're staying at the same master's institution, well, you should be able to glide straight into the PhD if that worked well. So I don't really know the specificities, but to go straight into the PhD, having done your master's, ideally you'll have a nice master's thesis, you'll have started to create some connections with people in the field, you'll have been able to demonstrate some evidence that you're good at research and you're serious about this, and you know which PhD to apply for. And Tina, just after, I'm going to link you to an applying to the PhD masterclass that we did in the group that helped a lot of students as they prepared their applications. And this too, it's also going to help you look at, because if one of the reasons you're opting for a PhD is to give you a better job salary-wise, I strongly advise against it. Just because the returns on investment from a PhD are much lower than other tracks. You get much more return, say, out of doing an MBA or a master in finance. There are many other areas that you can do that have a much better return on investment. The PhD, on average, you'll make more money, but salary, I wouldn't have be the main consideration in doing it, because it's such a huge time investment that can be 3-5 years or more. And the reality is 1 in 3 people who start a PhD don't finish for a number of reasons. So if, however, you're a mid-career professional and you have an efficient route to the PhD, like a PhD by publication, that you can keep doing your job, that might be a different factor. And I do work with some doctors, lawyers, and others who are mid-career who want to keep working, doing what they're doing, and have an efficient route to publish while they're doing it, to get the PhD, because that will open up higher funding opportunities or other career paths altogether. That can be interesting to consider. But really, doing a PhD, fundamentally, you've got to have a huge passion for a research topic. Fundamentally, more than anything, and often just salary-wise, is not enough to power through students, to power through all the hardship that's going to come along the way. Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions. Tina, thanks for sharing that with us. Um, um, happy that could help you. And I will definitely be sure to tag you in this. And I see in the studio with me here, we have Ariria, Aditya, Martins, Mavis as well. Glad to have you join. We're going to head to another meeting shortly. But just want to take a last couple minutes that we still have if there are any other burning questions. I hope you get value out of this and you can begin to see. I want you to comment below for us. Many of you are searching for a topic. We're probably going to do some more sessions on this mapping together and bring some people who are completely lost about finding their topic in on the program. And we're going to live do a dedicated session in finding a winning topic. And sometimes I think, a lot of the stuff in finding a topic, there's no textbook out there on how to do it. I can share with you the methods that have consistently helped my students find topics that get them highly cited papers, get them to the front end of the literature, and get themselves on that proverbial fast track where they get one paper out, another paper out, and start building connections, get attention from top people in the field, and soon they're getting all the resources they need to succeed and leaving others way behind them in the dust. So I want to help you guys achieve that and avoid some of the many mistakes that I made along the way. And if some of you are interested in that template for the CV, do comment below in the video. I'm going to send that over to Queen, and I will make that available to anybody who would find it helpful. Okay, guys, I think that is a good point for us to break today. Again, just foreshadowing next week, I'm tremendously excited about troubleshooting a relationship with a supervisor. So many people in this group said they're just not getting the support that they need. And I want to make sure that you guys can, before completely abandoning a supervisor or being in that situation, we can take a step back and sometimes interpret, what are the signs we're seeing? Just like with Mavis, interpreting the signs of a supervisor saying, this is really not my topic. This is not really right for us. Because sometimes there is something deeper going on there that we need to nip in the bud and deal with. And Gabriel's going to really share with you some horror stories about how bad it can be. And as bad as it can be, when you think you've hit rock bottom, Gabriel found a way. And I think you're all going to be inspired by his story. So have a great weekend, everybody. Looking forward to seeing you next week. As ever, send me your questions, your topics, things you're struggling with. And this is our time together. We will work on it to help all of you do things you need to do to succeed as grads and in your academic careers and beyond. Bye for now, everyone.